Welcome to another episode of Talk to the Fedora, chatting about hard-hitting, honest entrepreneur wisdom that you can use to grow your small business. I'm your host, Jarrod Goldsmith from eSAX Virtual Events, and today we're very pleased to be welcoming Carl Richards. Carl has spent more than 25 years behind the microphone, on radio and on stage, entertaining and influencing audiences worldwide. He's a three-time best-selling author, TEDx Speaker and MC, host of the Speaking of Speaking podcast, and the founder and CEO of Carl Speaks and the podcast Solutions Made Simple. Carl helps coaches, consultants, and other subject matter experts become the go-to authority by launching world-class podcasts. He lives with his spouse in Gananoque, Ontario, Canada, where he enjoys camping and boating in the Thousand Islands. Thank you so much for joining us today, Carl.
Oh, Jarrod, it's quite an honor. Thanks for having me on. I'm stoked. This is exciting.
Well, especially on our side, to be speaking and welcoming on our podcast, you're on the other side of the microphone most of the time.
I'm usually the guy interviewing people, not the person in the hot seat. But having said that, I mean, a good podcaster should be able to speak well as an interviewer and as a host. So as an interviewee rather, and as a host. So I'm happy to be in this chair.
Well, thank you so much, Carl. So listen, are you calling from Gananoque now?
Gananoque, actually, and yes, I am home. I am home in my lovely place in Gananoque, which is stone's throw to the St. Lawrence River. So whenever I need to go to the river, it's a 10-minute walk. It's not.
Oh, how nice! Yeah, very, very nice. So, Carl, let's talk a bit about your background. Who are you, and give us a little bit of an insider.
Yeah, sure. As you already indicated, I've spent 25 years in radio broadcasting, and then of course that thing called COVID hit, and gave me a huge opportunity to pivot and take the skills that I learned in broadcasting and a few things I learned along the way too in Toastmasters and things like that, and really pivot that into helping coaches, consultants, and other subject matter experts get into the podcasting space. And that's why we launched in 2020. The latter part of 2020, we launched Podcast Solutions Made Simple, which basically helps people do just that, get into the podcasting space, and which allows them to be seen as the expert while they still do what they do best, and that's stay in their zone of genius.
Yeah. Have you noticed much more of an uptick because of COVID, people going and learning more about podcasts?
Oh, phenomenal. For people who think podcasting's a fad, it's not going away anytime soon. I believe the stats are something like in 2019, there were 750,000 podcasts worldwide. We're now close to 3 million.
Wow.
Not bad for a fad.
Yeah, it's here to stay.
Yeah, it's not going anywhere soon. And I attune it to, if you think back 20 years ago when websites were in their infancy stages, a lot of people were, I don't know if I need a website. It sounds complicated. It's not me. Besides that, my Yellow Page ads are doing me well. Well, try to run a business now without some sort of online or web presence, right? People would look at you like you have three heads if you were trying to do that. So it's definitely a throwback to then. And I think it's just going to continue to grow.
Right. Carl, you mentioned how it adds credibility to somebody's brand. How does that work?
Much the same way that it works if you're looking to publish a book. Like a lot of people, especially coaches, consultants, people that have been in the business world for a while, the speakers, they'll write a book and then they'll go on a speaking tour.
Right.
Well, a podcast is essentially a speaking opportunity. So it's essentially the same thing. So if you're publishing a book, what are you doing? You're elevating your credibility. If you have a podcast, it's your channel. Just like this is your channel, you get to put your best foot out there, and of course all your guests' input as well. But you get to put your knowledge base, expert insights out there, so to speak, and let everyone know that you're the go-to person. So that's how it does that. It's similar to how a book does it. Basically the same principles, because people see you in that place. Or if you're the person being interviewed on the radio, there's a throwback to my radio days. People would see those people in the interview chair as experts.
Right.
So it's really helping you get in that spot.
I like what you said before. Put my best hat forward. Okay, so Carl, let's. Do you have a background in entrepreneurship or business when you decided to really go in full time on podcasts?
Zero. Well, sorry, let me rephrase that. Between radio gigs in 2011, I launched a part-time business doing speaker training,
Mhm.
and that was a great opportunity. And I always wanted to take it full time, and just kept getting amazing opportunities to stay in radio, and kept accepting them. And so that was my only business experience though. So I learned
Yeah.
as I was going, and had some great coaches along the way. And it was from there, that with that experience, that I was able to pivot reasonably quickly when things, and it wasn't right at the start of COVID, but certainly within a few months into that,
Right.
I was looking at this as probably going to be a full-time endeavor very, very soon, not knowing where it was going to take me, but no business experience prior to that. I didn't grow up in a household where, mom and dad had businesses. They both worked. My dad worked in a factory. My mother had various jobs in clerical and things like that, but no background in business.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, Carol, you mentioned something very important, how you had coaches. I mean, I know much of your market is business coaches and
Mhm.
consultants now, but when you were launching the podcast, you dealt with coaches. So, how important is the concept of collaboration for you?
Oh, collaboration is huge. I mean, I think you need to be able to not just make those connections, but always look for those opportunities where you can have a joint venture partnership, or collaborate, like you said, with other individuals. And I'm always looking for those opportunities. That's not a shameless promotion. It's just the truth. If you're looking for it, or you're open to it, you never know when those opportunities could arise, or in what capacity. But the collaboration, being able to not only work with individuals that need a show, but also look at it and say, okay, well, they need a show. How many of their clients potentially need a show? And is there an opportunity for a collaboration, be it a speaking opportunity, be it a webinar in front of their clients? All kinds of opportunities that can arise from that. But collaboration is huge.
Well, thank you. A lot of the times we hear people, as an entrepreneur, small business startup, I have to do everything myself. If I collaborate, they're going to steal my ideas. Uh,
Here's the way I look at it. There is more than enough work out there,
mhm.
and especially in the podcasting world, with an industry that's growing exponentially, there's more than enough work out there. So if I collaborate with you and you're in the podcasting space, I don't think we're going to step on each other's
Yeah.
toes, because there's so much work to be had. I'm not at capacity. And even if I did hit a level where I felt I was at capacity, as far as I have a good number of clients and I don't want to take on any more, that would be my choice, by the way,
Sure.
because I could grow an empire if I wanted to. And you know what? There would still be opportunities for other individuals.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
speaking of other individuals, the concept of networking. When you were launching the podcast during COVID,
Yeah.
were you attending networking events? How were you leveraging some of the contacts you've had?
Well, and here's the thing, everything shifted to online.
Mhm.
So all of the networking I had done previously was in person. And now I had to go and figure out, okay, where should I be sharing with people what I do? So thankfully, I already had a fair-sized Facebook following, and Facebook, the algorithm back 2 years ago was a little bit more gentle to do things like create groups and
Nice way
get
to put it. Yeah.
people, yeah, and get people into those groups. So I was able to launch a Facebook group called Podcast Launch Made Simple. And that group was designed to get people into learning more about podcasting, not just in the Facebook space, but also take some workshops. And then that was my lead, basically, to get people into programs and other more detailed programs that would get them basically launching their shows. And then the agency came later, but the networking piece was huge. I had to still be able to get out there and network. So I found online, virtual networking groups,
Mhm.
and it was just by being open to, again, being open to collaboration, that's been able to happen. So, but being able to jump into networking groups that I would never have found if I was still working a full-time job, right? Because I wouldn't have been looking for it. But here I am now looking for those opportunities to network. And if I hadn't jumped into various networking opportunities, I don't think it would have happened. Everything from, here's a networking group and it costs me, or the investment rather, is so much per year. But here's another networking group that it's essentially free to attend, but you can still make your offer, kind of thing. So
Right.
it really was a huge part of catapulting the business forward back in 2020.
I love hearing this. I mean, networking is a big part of our business model,
That's
and
huge.
that's what eSAX is known for. Would you care to share some of your favorite networking tips?
Get out there and do it. That's the first one I think is. I think the biggest tip, other than get out there and do it, is I think you have to network in places where you know your clients are going to be.
Right.
And I say that gently because I know it's nice to go out into physical networking spaces, especially when we can go out and play again and do some of those breakfast type meetings. But if your clients aren't there, are you really connecting the way you want to? Yes, it's good to get your name out there, but if you know your clients are somewhere else, then that's the key is you need to go to where they are. So that could mean networking, not just in the physical space. Obviously, now we're spending a lot of time in the virtual space, but
Yeah.
that might mean networking in professional organizations. I have become a member of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers because I know that a good part of, and as a supplier member, because I know a good portion of my potential clients and my audience is there. But then also when you are networking, if you're not necessarily convinced you're in front of your ideal client, what's your downsell? So you need to be able to know all the aspects of your business. Other tips when networking is I think you need to be able to open your mouth and speak at any given opportunity because you never know when you'll be given that opportunity. And when I say speak, I don't mean shake hands and introduce yourself. I mean, if there's a speaker that doesn't show up, for example, in a networking setting, are you prepared to go and speak for 10 minutes or 12 minutes about what it is that you do? And you should
Absolutely.
always be ready to do that.
You said something very important. It's not necessarily a cost to attend networking events. It's more
Mhm.
an investment. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I cost is kind of a dirty word. I mean, it's positive language, right? I mean, a lot of people think of, oh, it's expensive. Oh, it's going to cost me money. That's a
Yeah.
mindset thing. So I always look at it as instead of it's costing me, it's an investment. It's an investment in my business. It's an investment in myself. It's an investment in my lifestyle. So I've shifted my language, and it's taken me years to do this, by the
Yeah.
way, to use words like investment and opportunity as opposed to oh, it's costing me money, oh, it's going to leave me broke, all those things that the negative speak that can sometimes drive us not down a path we want to go. But that's what I mean by an investment when you look at it in those terms. And same as, here's another example, the word sales. A lot
Yeah.
of people hate sales because people hate being sold to.
That's
But what
right.
if you shifted that word and said, well, because I've said for years I'm not good at sales. And I'll be honest, I'm not good at sales. But you know what I'm good at, Jarrod? I'm good at service. I'm good
Mm.
at giving people the good, top quality service for whatever it is that they need
Yeah.
within what I'm doing in my business.
Absolutely. Because we want
So
to stay in
that
business. And
but that's
yeah.
but that also is mindset because now when you're going on a sales call, you think, oh, I have to sell something, I have to sell something, I have to try and close this deal. But if you go in with the mindset of, you know what, I'm really wanting to provide the best service.
Yeah.
I think it again that pivot in the mindset makes a huge difference.
That's a big point, Carl, because the mindset, like when I launched my band in 2011, I used to go to every single network event in the city. And it was more than one person. I called it a networking event. And most of them were free. Didn't have much money
Mhm.
back then.
Yep.
Not that I have much now, but I'm working on it. And then just realizing it took me about 2 years to realize all of these free events, they're not having 600-person cocktail receptions where they need a band.
Mhm.
So I joined the chambers of commerce and higher ticket prices. And I found it took a while for me to realize who my main demographic was. Would they
Yeah.
go to the free events or would they go to the $200 galas? So it was an investment. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the thing, knowing you have to know where your clients are playing.
Yeah.
You really do.
Yeah.
And it's I'd like to say it's common knowledge or it sounds like it's just common sense to realize that.
Yeah.
But a lot of us think, well, if I'm networking, then I'm networking. And I know people will spread the word and I know people will find me. It's the the old adage of if you build it, they will come. Well, yes, that's
Right.
true, but you have to build it, and you have to build it in a place where people will see it. If you built a multiplex, I don't know, a big 50,000 square foot facility in the middle of the Arctic, yeah, you've built something, but firstly, who's going to go there? Who's going to see it? What are the chances of that being successful, as opposed to building something like that on a piece of land, if you could find any, say in Vegas, or up the road from Vegas, or somewhere in a developing community in Canada, where that, okay, well, this neighborhood's growing, so
Right.
there's going to be a reason for this place.
Well, it's understanding the market and where your client's going to be coming
Yeah.
from.
So that's so networking is the exact same thing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not just about saying, okay, I'm networking. You really need to look at it and say, yes, my prospects, they're going to be here. Because I've seen people do that. I've seen people get involved in organizations and spend a lot of time in those organizations just hoping and praying they'll make the connections they want. When if they just looked a little bit further up the road, so to speak, they know that that's where their connections are. It's kind of like if you want to get, if your prospect or your ideal client, for example, is a CEO,
Hmm.
they're not hanging out most likely in breakfast networking meeting settings.
Yeah.
They're not there. If they are, that's the one in I don't know how many thousand would be hanging out in a setting like that. They're doing far greater things at that time of day than having coffee and a breakfast that's probably overpriced.
Yeah.
Did I say that out loud?
That's very true. I think it might help people realize the value of attending those weekly sessions if that's not where their main demographic is.
Sure.
So, Carl, your podcast solutions made simple. Let's talk a bit about branding. How has branding affected your podcast empire, if you will?
It's not an empire yet, but thank you. I appreciate you putting that forward. That's my goal for the next calendar year. It's going to be an empire. There we go. I appreciate that. Branding, I mean, branding has been huge. And when I launched my speaker training business, again, it was part-time. What made sense in 2011 doesn't make sense now. Like branding has really shifted a lot. So I really had to focus on uh, not just what the visual for my branding was, but what is the sound of my branding? I'm in a very auditory business,
Yeah.
but every business has not just a visual, but every business has a sound. I mean, when you think of
I
even
like the pun of it, the sound of the auditory, because
the
that's what.
yeah. Well, when you think of even larger companies, there's a sound, or there's a jingle, or there's some type of a musical feel to it. Everything from coffee to hamburgers to that's food, but even cars. Like there's a sound, or there's a pulse. There's some type of sonic presence to it.
Yeah.
That to me is the part of branding that a lot of people miss. They just don't think of it. They think of the visual. They think I need a fancy logo, and the fancier the logo, the better. It's not all about logos. It used to be all about logos, but now even larger companies don't have the same flashy logos that they had before. If they've been around for a while, if you give car companies like Ford and GM, yeah, their logos haven't changed much, but they're not as flashy as they were 50, 60 years ago. They've really curtailed the flashiness of it and thought about, okay, we need to have branding that fits into branding that can be used in many different ways, not just on letterhead, if people even use letterhead anymore, but it needs to look good. It also needs to sound good. It needs to be able to be used many different ways,
Right.
be it in an email, be it in a podcast, be it in a whatever it is, so that people get that this is my brand. And you need to be able to not just look at things like logos, but the messaging. I've learned a lot about messaging and how that is very clear about what your brand is.
Yeah,
And again,
what would you say when people think a brand? Yeah, it's more than a logo or an
yeah.
image. It's the feeling that it portrays. Like when you're
Mhm.
starting up as a small business owner, how do you even envision what your brand could look like in a few years?
it's tricky, and it's honestly, it's in some cases it's trial and error. When I dove into the podcasting world, again, having spent 25 years in radio,
Right.
and also a number of years doing speaker training as well, I kind of knew what branding should look like. I
Right.
kind of figured that it probably, podcasting, it probably needs a microphone, or it needs, a headset, like earphones that look good. But to
Probably
what
doesn't hurt.
degree? And then what's it going to sound like? And that's the part that people have a hard time envisioning, because envisioning sound. So it's a hard wrapping their head around, because we don't understand how a sound or a vibration can really impact the business, how certain colors impact the business. So, and these are things I've learned in the last 2 years. It's not something that I was not born into it, and I certainly didn't understand it when I was doing speaker training, just speaker training. But in launching the podcast and really the podcasting business and getting into that space, I really started to look at, okay, colors are important, font is important, the right feel, but what's the feel, what's the vibe? So we have in the business now, we just created this. We have a standardized might not be the right word, but we have a theme. We have a musical theme that is the same in all of our videos. It's not that we're not creative and we don't like other kinds of music, but we know that if we're consistent with that theme, even though it's background music, people start to associate that with the brand. And it's original music, by the way. It's not something that is from an open source or from a royalty-free service. It's original score. And that's the other thing that is important, is being as original as you can be in a space where originality it's hard to be original sometimes.
It really is. And I'm glad you brought this up, Carl, because the concept of processes, and in this case, you already started talking a bit about how the sound is an original score. Like the concept of processes is something I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize at the beginning. Besides that, like, has the processes for you during COVID, has it changed?
No, it's exactly the same. I'm kidding. Yes, I'm a joker. Yes, as a matter of fact, it has changed. I mean, and think about it this way: business has changed a lot, even in the last 2.5 years. It really, really has. I mean, we can look back and say, okay, since 2010, has it changed? Yes, but has it changed radically in the last couple of years? Yes. We spend so much time in a virtual space now. We have to be sensitive to, I believe we have to be sensitive to, how many times are we inviting people, for example, to a Zoom call? We're not on the Zoom platform right now, obviously, but how many times are we inviting people to a in-person, an in front of my computer call? People are getting tired. There's a lot of fatigue in that space. So we have to be cognizant of that. We have to be cognizant of, too, follow-up. And follow-up might mean you might have to bring somebody onto your team if you don't have somebody on your team to help you do this, because we have to follow up more so now than we did, again, even 2 or 3 years ago. Because it's not just, I just saw you, Jarrod, at our breakfast meeting, and you know what, if I don't follow up with you this week with a phone call or an email, it's not the end of the world. I'll probably see you next week. It's no, I have to follow up, because if I don't, I might forget. I might not see you again. So the follow-up is important, more so now than ever. Value, I think, is important. People are also, I believe, getting smarter. I think that we're getting more savvy to not just making snap decisions. We want to know before we do business with you or start a relationship with you, that you're the real deal. We're not just going out, and buying a car because it looks pretty.
But that comes back to when we first started talking about the concept of credibility. Like when somebody's going to work with you, I mean, if they're hiring you for a consultant to help whatever organization, they're probably going to Google you or your business.
Yeah, they're going to Google you. They're also going to most likely check out your LinkedIn profile if they're in a professional space. So your LinkedIn profile, and I know mine's not perfect, it needs some tweaks, but if it looks good and it's a good reflection of you, excellent. If you haven't updated it in 5 or 6 years
Yeah.
and life has changed for you, you might want to take a look at that. And it's not overly, I mean, you can spend thousands of dollars tweaking your LinkedIn profile if you want, but you don't have to do that. It can be a minimal investment to have somebody, even a coach, walk you through a few simple things, somebody that knows that platform well. The same as Facebook, if you're still playing in that space, if you want to tweak that space to make it more effective for you. But again, I think these are part of the processes. It's understanding, okay, I have a follow-up process. I have a process for, or a methodology for networking. And I'm not just going out and willy-nilly doing it. I have a process for that. I also have a process for if I'm talking with a prospect and we're having a great conversation, I should know by the end of that first call, is this worth a follow-up call? Is this worth a deeper discussion about product, service? Is there a collaboration there? But I think putting those processes in place to help you along the way. And then of course the follow-up is the hugest thing, I believe, because I don't think we do it nearly enough. I've actually, in my, when I was doing speaker training and speaking with other coaches that would go to events all the time, they would share that most people that would attend trade shows, large events where they had a booth, they wouldn't follow up. They wouldn't pick up the phone. They wouldn't send a follow-up email.
Yeah.
I'm like, why? That's leaving money on the table, right? I mean,
yeah, it's one of the most important parts of the networking scene is following up right away.
Yeah.
And discussing what you talked about so the person remembers that, you're not just a business card to them.
And if you don't hear back, I think this is the other, and this isn't necessarily a process, but goes to mindset. If you don't hear back, you don't know why. I mean, I think a lot of people think if they don't hear back, oh my goodness, they don't like me now.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going on in that other person's life. They heaven forbid, but they may have passed away. They may have left their business. They may have they may have a spouse that has some critical illness and they're not focused on their own business right now like they typically would be.
Right.
So the follow-up is important, but giving up, you have nothing to lose. But if you give up, then you possibly lost everything, and possibly for no reason. Sure. And I say that because I know that was my mindset for so long. If people aren't getting back to me, they must not like me. I must have done something to offend them, or I'm too pushy. But it might not be that at all.
Yeah, we never know. All the best we could do is do the right things, follow up, connect on LinkedIn or whatever social media platform. Yeah. Carl, let's talk about some time management tips. Like when you're booking potential clients, speaking engagements, like, do you have an appointment, a scheduler, an assistant? How do you manage your time?
Sure, absolutely. As far as, I mean, if we're talking virtual calls with prospects, for virtual coffees, those kinds of things, what I have now on the new website is I have an intake form. And I will drive people to my intake form. If it's just a virtual coffee, I'll throw you my calendar link, no problem. But if it's we want to talk about podcasting, well, before we get to that space, I want to make sure that you at least understand something of podcasting before we have a conversation, because I don't want to spend an hour, half an hour even, educating you. I'd rather you come to the space knowing at least a little bit about where you want to go. Yeah. What is it that you need to know, and what is it that I need to know about you? So there's that. But then there's also the piece of, as far as time management goes, when I'm looking at, for example, recording, I have specific days that I record my episodes, and I stick to that for the most part. If somebody can't fit in, for example, a Thursday or a Friday, okay, if it has to be a Monday, that's fine. Right. But I respect not only my time, but also the time of the people who I'm bringing on my show. And in launching a second show very soon, I know that those time slots are going to be filled, but I still need to be respectful of that time. Also being respectful of, time when I should be starting my day, time when I should be ending my day. I know a lot of people, especially if they're new in the entrepreneurial world, they're saying, oh, I can work from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. Yeah. You might think you can do that at first, but you do that for a few days, especially if you're even a few months, especially if you're a little bit older.
Or have a family.
Or have family. Yeah. So I'm in my early 50s. And you know what? I could probably have had that kind of a schedule when I was in my 20s. But in my 50s, I don't want to work so many hours in a day. So I have to be respectful of that and mindful of that. And also being aware that time management also means time for you. It's time for you. It's time for one of the things that my coach says to me all the time. She says, the first thing you do when you're planning your year, if you can, is you book your vacation.
Very wise, and you work around it. Yeah.
Exactly. And when you book vacation, that's sacred time that you don't say, oh, I'm on vacation, I can take a client call. Unless it's an emergency,
Yeah.
then yes. Okay. But even then, if you have a team, your team can handle it, unless it's a crucial, again, if you're the sales and marketing piece of your business or the face of your business, and you need to make a decision, as long as you're within communication. But here's the thing. What if you're on what if you're on some type of a safari in a part of the world where you don't have, you're off the grid. You don't have phone service while you're away. And that could be even in Canada. If you're camping in some parts of northern Canada, you might not have access to communication.
Yeah.
So really take note of that, and definitely make sure that you book that time and you respect that time. You'll feel better about it and you'll be refreshed. And that's what your clients want. They want the best version of you.
Yeah, because when it start becoming a chore in our business, oh, I have to do this, I have to send this follow up. It's not a good mindset to be in.
Yeah, no, it's not a good place to be. And it can lead to other things too. It can lead to depression. It can lead to, if you're at your desk too many hours a day and not getting fresh air, it can lead to health issues. It can lead to, heaven forbid, substance abuse. Like, there's many things that it can lead to when you're not respecting that downtime, even just to go, get some fresh air, go for a walk. These are all simple things, but you put them in your calendar. I block out time. Again, this is my coach telling me to do this. After years of working in an industry, by the way, where I had my own schedule. My employer didn't, chain me to the desk and say, you have to take lunch at noon and it can only be half an hour. Mm-hmm. Start time was a little bit different. You had to be in the building for a specific time. But as far as, you want to take lunch, great. You don't want to take lunch, that's fine. We're happy either way. It doesn't matter. But I schedule lunch, and I schedule an hour and a half. It doesn't take me that long to eat, hopefully. But if I scheduled only 30 minutes, I probably give myself 10. Yeah. But giving myself an hour and a half, I now know I have time to eat lunch consistently. But I also give myself now time to go for a walk.
Really important. Carl, talking a bit about the work-life balance, the adapting. What about some challenges or even some failures that you've had to help educate some of our listeners?
No failures. None. Zero. I'm lying through my through my teeth. Failures aren't failures in my mind if you're failing forward. So I look at, everyone thinks failure is like getting an F in school, right? Think back to the days when, I don't even know if they give Fs anymore, but I know when I was in school, they gave A's through, I think they stopped at F. I don't think they went to G or H or Z. I think they stopped at F. But failure to me is, have I learned something from that? So have there been lessons learned along the way? And the absolute honest answer is yes. I think the biggest thing that I've learned in business is, and this is going back even to 2011 when I was doing speaker training, and it's carried through right till now, is understand that it might not happen at the speed at which you want it to happen. Because I think when we're in that entrepreneurial chair, we want it to happen. We have a vision or a goal, or we're on a mission that it's going to happen in the next 2 years or in the next 3 months. In the next 3 months, I'm going to have this much income. And it might not happen. But here's the thing. If you take a look at it, really reflect on it, and it's not to find fault, but say, okay, well, why isn't this happening? Why isn't it happening? Is it me? And quite often, by the way, it is you. Not you personally, Jarrod, but it's Jarrod's fault in the world, just so you know. Blame Jarrod. But no, it's usually internal. It's usually, why isn't this happening fast enough? And the biggest thing that you can change today that will help you fail forward all the time is mindset.
Mm.
And we talked about this earlier where we talked about, communication and the difference between a cost and an investment. It's amazing how changing your language and changing your dialogue can
Right.
be a huge uptick in how things move forward for you. And
You know, this is interesting, Carl, because today's generation, everything's at the tip of our, fingers. We want it fast and expedient, but business might take some time. It's that longevity, and it's that forward thinking, like you talked about. It's like the networking. It's a process. It takes time, and a business might not generate income for the first 6 months.
it's true.
Yeah. So
You and as far as networking goes too, you can't just show up to one networking meeting
oh,
and think, oh, this is why didn't I make a sale, or why didn't anyone get my business card? We're really throwing back now. Why didn't anybody get my business card and ask for a follow-up meeting?
yeah,
From one meeting. You can't. It's like here's one. It's like eating one salad and think you're going to lose 50 pounds.
it's a very
It's
good
not going
analogy.
to happen. You need consistency. I have a colleague who's also a member of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, and one of his messages that he talks about all the time is small, consistent actions. If you have small, consistent actions every day, it doesn't have to be huge. It could be, did you do your follow-up? Maybe you're not feeling so great. Maybe the dog kept you awake last night because they ate something they weren't supposed to. I have a dog. This happens sometimes. The dog will keep me awake, and maybe I don't sleep well. So maybe I don't achieve everything I want to do on my list, on my task
Yeah.
for that day.
Yeah.
But what if I just did all my follow-ups? It's
Yeah.
a small, consistent action.
Becoming lifestyle changes, and I feel like you hit it the nail on the head.
Mhm.
Little bits every day adds up. Showing up, being consistent, that branding, all the other things we talked about.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah.
Carl, let's talk about what's next. Like, where do you want to be in a couple of years from now? You mentioned the launch of a new series of podcasts coming down the pipes. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. The new podcast is going to be all about podcasting.
Okay.
There are, as I said, there's almost 3 million podcasts out there now at the recording of this video.
Yeah.
And it's hard to believe that a lot of those podcasts, hardly any of them are about podcasting.
Yeah, right.
So I am launching a podcast. There's maybe 20 podcasts around the world that speak about podcasting in all different languages.
Mhm.
So I'm launching a podcast that's all about podcasting and my journey, my experience, but also the experiences of others that have launched their own podcasts and how they're doing in the podcasting space. So we're excited to launch that, hopefully early 2023. Like again, this is patience and perseverance and really working it. This was supposed to launch in September and it hasn't launched yet. And if I had launched too early, I think it wouldn't have had the same impact. So we just put it off. So anyways, we're excited to launch that. And then as we look ahead the next, if we look 2 to 5 years down the line, I know 5 years, it's hard to look that far ahead and say, where are things going to be? But I can certainly see from a business perspective, us continuing to shape and grow and really have an impact in the industry, in the podcasting space, but then also having an impact in the lives of people who are, as I said, in the coaching space, consultants who really want to be seen in that expert space. And I think that's going to continue to grow. People will start to embrace this medium, if we can call it that, more. And I think that'll create huge opportunities, not just for myself, but for others as well.
I love talking to people like you who are really making things happen, because you're right. So many of the podcasts, the millions of podcasts out there, they're on a subject matter. But
Yeah.
how many of them are based on how to do successful podcasts?
Not many.
Yeah. I look forward
So
to following the success then, Carl.
Yeah, that's why we're excited to launch it, and not just in a here's how you do a podcast interview. Yeah, okay, some of the episodes will be about that, but you
Yeah.
probably would like to hear as well from people who have been in that space and had much success with it. And there are some very successful people in this space, and we're excited to be sharing their story on that platform and giving people the confidence, if I can use that word, the confidence that they need now to decide, yes, it's time to get into this space because my business needs it and it can change my life. I know that sounds very cliche-ish to say it like that, but if it can bring more revenue in or create awareness if you're not looking at a podcast for business, it's because they're not all about business. Some are about awareness.
Yeah.
But if it's a matter of getting all of that out, imagine what that can do, not only for your life, but the lives of others. And that's the way we look at it.
Brilliant.
So I'm excited to continue to see that grow.
Excellent. Me too. I look forward to seeing that. Carl, so we're going to be wrapping up shortly. Do you have any final words of wisdom? We've already talked about a lot about words of wisdom, but some final parting thoughts for the small businesses listening in.
Yeah, I would say the best piece of advice or the wisdom I can give you is that first step is probably the hardest to take if you're at the starting gate, but it really is the most important one. And if you just keep taking steps, don't try and get from here to the end of the marathon. If I can use a marathon analogy, get from here to the end of the marathon in 2 easy steps. There is no 2 easy steps. And the entrepreneurial journey is not a straight line. It sometimes has, moments where you fall back. Yeah, exactly. It looks like, if you remember, Jarrod, I don't know if you remember this, but spirograph.
Yeah.
Drawing pictures, and it's definitely not a straight line. But if you keep moving forward, and when you fail, you're failing forward, and you're learning from those mistakes, then you're going to get there. And the best piece of advice to wrap it up is don't give up. Because if you give up, that's probably the worst thing you could do.
Yeah, the patience, that thinking long term. Like, I've always been a big believer, Carl, of, you're doing what you do because you love it. You want to still do it in 5, 10 years from now. So what are you doing now to make it happen?
Yeah. Imagine if, here's a good example. Imagine if the owners of Starbucks gave up. I think if I remember the story correctly, it was something like 500 investors, and it was the 501st investor that said yes. Well, imagine if they stopped at 398 and just gave up.
Wow.
So it's important to keep moving forward.
Move the spirograph forward every time.
Yeah. Try and straighten the line if you can, but understand that it's never a straight line. And even if you put it under a microscope, a straight line is not a straight line.
Carl, thank you. How can somebody get in touch with you, please?
Absolutely. podcastsolutionsmadesimple.com is the website, and ask Carl at carlspeaks.ca, which still links to my old website, but goes right to my calendar page. So those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me, and happy to have a conversation in any capacity, virtual coffee. Yeah, happy to meet up.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Carl. So today, folks, on the Talk to the Fedora podcast, we were joined by Carl Richards of Carl Speaks and Podcast Solutions Made Simple. Thank you for joining us as we share some entrepreneur wisdom. We hope that this segment has helped to grow your small business. Please subscribe to our eSAX YouTube channel, and be sure to check out some of the hundreds of other eSAX videos for more great entrepreneurial content. Thank you very much, Carl.